What if the greatest threat to your home was not a person, not a spirit, not a curse, but a creature you have seen 100 times and never once feared? Animals that many women unknowingly permit through their doors, throwing open dangerous spiritual gateways. Which animals are they, and why did Saint Teresa fear them so deeply? Saint Teresa did not only experience divine ecstasies and heavenly visions, she also received grave warnings about spiritual dangers that lurk in our homes. Among her lesser-known revelations, there is one that should shake every Christian to the core. A warning about 4 specific animals that must never cross the threshold of a home where faith dwells. These are not ordinary creatures. Saint Teresa identified them as carriers of dark influences, living keys that unlock doors to discord, spiritual sickness, and separation from God. And what makes this all the more unsettling is that many Christian women have welcomed them in without ever realizing the danger. Today, you will discover which 4 animals they are, why Saint Teresa feared them so deeply, and what to do if any of them has already made its way into your home. If you believe in the power of prayer and desire protection for your family, write in the comments, "Jesus protects my home." Stay with me until the very last moment, because at the end I will reveal the 3 exact words Saint Teresa spoke every night before sleep to seal her home against these spiritual invaders. Words that have protected thousands of families for centuries, yet most Christians have never heard them. Honor this sacred teaching. Give it a like if you long for a home filled with God's blessings, and subscribe if you are seeking the peace that only He can give. It was the year 1572. Saint Teresa of Avila was deep in prayer in her cell at the convent of Saint Joseph when she experienced one of the most unsettling revelations of her mystical life. It was not a heavenly vision. It was not an ecstasy of divine love. It was a warning about the invisible gateways of the Christian home and the creatures that can pass through them to contaminate a family's peace. In her personal writings, which very few people have read with any real care, Saint Teresa describes how the Lord showed her that certain animals act as spiritual keys. Animals that, upon entering a house, bring not only their physical presence, but open portals to dark influences that weaken faith, sow discord, and drive away God's blessings. The first of these animals is the owl, and when Saint Teresa speaks of it, she does not do so lightly. She speaks with a reverent dread, the solemnity of someone who has witnessed the spiritual harm this nocturnal creature can bring. The owl is no ordinary bird. Since biblical times, it has been regarded as a creature of ill omen. In the book of Leviticus, it appears among the unclean birds forbidden to the people of God. In the book of Isaiah, the owl is associated with desolation, with places forsaken by God's presence. And in the mystical tradition of the Church, this night creature has long been seen as a messenger of misfortune, a bearer of energies that disturb the rest and peace of a household. Saint Teresa understood something that many Christian women have never considered. The owl is not simply a bird that calls in the night. It is a living symbol of spiritual inversion. While birds of the day represent light, songs of praise, and life flourishing under the Son of God, the owl represents the opposite. It lives in darkness. It hunts in silence. Its eyes are built to see in the shadows. And according to Saint Teresa, its presence near a Christian home is a signal that something within that house has stepped out from under the light of Christ. But there is more. The owl does not merely represent darkness. It represents the overturning of the natural order that God established. In Scripture, God separates light from darkness, day from night, and ordains that the day is for work and the night for rest. The owl defies that order. It is awake when everyone sleeps. It is active when the world rests. And that haunting call, the sound so many women have heard drifting through their windows at night, is not just any sound. According to Saint Teresa, When an owl calls persistently near a home, it is a sign, a warning that something within that household has drawn this creature close. It may be the absence of prayer. It may be the presence of objects that have never been blessed. It may be words of cursing spoken in a moment of anger. It may be the lack of sacramentals protecting the entrances. But there is always a spiritual reason behind its arrival. And what is most troubling is what happens when the owl does not merely call near the house, but actually enters. When it flies through an open window, when it perches on the roof, when it nests close to the home. In such cases, the spiritual consequences begin to manifest in ways that are subtle yet deeply damaging. Families that have allowed owls to take up residence near their homes report strikingly similar patterns. Recurring nightmares, especially in children, unexplained insomnia, a sense of presence in the night, sudden waking for no apparent reason, fears of the dark that never existed before, and most gravely, a gradual decline in family prayer, as though something unseen is blocking the very desire to draw near to God. Saint Teresa warns that the owl does not act alone. It is the first animal, the one that clears the path for the others. For once the spiritual darkness that the owl represents settles into a home, the doors are left ajar for other creatures of negative influence to find their way in as well. For this reason, in the mystical tradition that Saint Teresa passed on to her Carmelite sisters, there is a clear teaching. Never allow an owl to nest near the house. Never leave windows open at night without the protection of holy water. Never ignore the persistent call of this bird near the home, because its presence is not coincidence. It is a spiritual invitation that someone, without knowing it, has extended. And if any Christian woman has been hearing an owl call night after night, if she has seen this bird perched on her roof or in the trees outside her window, she must understand that she is not looking at a simple occurrence of nature. She is looking at a spiritual sign that demands immediate attention. She is facing the first warning that her home needs to be purified, consecrated, and sealed under divine protection, because this is only the first animal, the first of four. And if the owl is the bearer of darkness and the inversion of God's order, the other three animals bring dangers that run even deeper, dangers that Saint Teresa perceived with crystal clarity, and that every Christian woman must know in order to protect her family. But this first animal is not the most dangerous. There is one that Saint Teresa feared more than any other, one whose presence in the home does not merely bring darkness, but literally opens doors to forces that destroy from within. The second animal that Saint Teresa identified in her mystical revelation is one that provokes a visceral fear in nearly every woman, a creature that announces nothing. It does not call like the owl. It enters without a sound, without warning, and is often only discovered once it has already made itself at home. We are speaking of the bat, and if the owl represents the inversion of divine order, the bat represents something even more unsettling. It represents silent invasion, contamination that takes hold without anyone noticing, a presence that installs itself in the dark corners of a house, and from there begins to spread its negative influence throughout the entire family. Saint Teresa wrote in her personal notes that the bat is the creature of darkness above all others. It does not merely live in darkness like the owl. The bat inhabits caves, the places where light never reaches. And when this animal leaves its natural habitat to enter a home, it brings that same spiritual darkness along with it. In the biblical tradition, caves and dark places are always associated with separation from God. Jesus is born in a cave, yes, but it is immediately illuminated by the Star of Bethlehem. The prophets who take shelter in caves do so fleeing persecution, not by choice. And when Lazarus is raised, Christ commands the stone to be removed so that light can enter. Light must always overcome darkness. That is the divine order. But the bat lives in contradiction to that order. It does not merely prefer the dark, It needs it to survive. Its body is designed to flee the light. Its eyes cannot bear the sun. And its entry into a Christian home, according to Saint Teresa, is a sign that something in that house has ceased to be illuminated by the presence of God. Now, many women will say it is perfectly normal for bats to come in occasionally, especially at dusk when they are hunting insects. And that is true. It can happen. But Saint Teresa was not speaking of a single accidental entry. She was speaking of recurring presence, of the bat that enters again and again, of the bat that finds shelter in the roof, the attic, the dark spaces of the house, of the bat that nests, stays, and establishes territory. When that happens, the spiritual consequences begin to manifest in very specific ways. And this is where Saint Teresa was extraordinarily precise in her mystical observations. She noted that families where bats had taken up residence began to experience what she called blindness of the soul. What is blindness of the soul? It is the gradual inability to perceive spiritual truths. It is when a Christian family begins to normalize sin, when the faults that once caused remorse are now explained away, when prayer is no longer a priority because there's no time, when Sunday Mass becomes optional, when conversations about God disappear from the family table, when children begin to drift from the faith and their parents feel no urgency to correct the course. All of this Saint Teresa attributed to the influence of the bat in the home. For just as the bat cannot see in the light, families under its influence lose the ability to see spiritual light. They begin to live in a darkness that no longer troubles them, a darkness that even starts to feel normal. And there is something more. The bat does not only bring spiritual blindness, it brings what Saint Teresa called the contagion of impurity. In the tradition of the Old Testament, the bat is considered an unclean animal. It was not to be touched. It was not to be consumed. Its very presence required ritual purification. Why? Because the bat feeds on blood or on dead insects depending on the species. It lives among the excrement of caves. It carries disease. It is, in essence, a creature associated with decay and death. When the bat enters a Christian home and establishes its presence, it brings with it that same spiritual contamination. Families begin to experience recurring illnesses with no clear medical explanation. Allergies that appear out of nowhere. Respiratory problems, persistent headaches, chronic fatigue, and most unsettling of all, a heaviness in the atmosphere of the home that no amount of physical cleaning seems to lift. Saint Teresa warned her Carmelite sisters specifically that if they ever found a bat inside the convent, they must act immediately. Removing it was not enough. The space where it had been must be blessed. Prayer must be offered. Holy water must be sprinkled in every corner. The entry points through which it had come must be closed and consecrated with blessed oil. Because the bat, unlike the owl, which at least announces its presence with its call, is the silent invader, the one that enters without being seen, the one that hides in places no one ever checks, the one that stays concealed during the day and only emerges when everyone is asleep. And that same furtive nature is precisely what makes it such a grave spiritual danger. Many Christian women have bats in their roofs and have no idea. They have heard strange noises in the night but ignored them. They have noticed dark stains on walls but never investigated. They have detected an odd smell in certain rooms but put it down to damp. And all the while, the bat's presence continues its quiet work, continuing to darken the spiritual vision of that family, continuing to contaminate the sacred atmosphere that every Christian home ought to carry. And if you find the bat troubling, wait until you discover the third animal, because the third brings not only darkness or blindness, the third brings something that tears families apart from within, something that Saint Teresa described as the poison that is woven in silence. And once it enters, it is nearly impossible to detect until the damage has already been done. The third animal that Saint Teresa identified in her revelation is one that almost every woman has encountered in her own home at some point. One that appears harmless because of its size. One that many people even tolerate because it catches mosquitoes or it does no harm. But Saint Teresa warned with absolute firmness that this creature must never be permitted in a Christian home. We are speaking of the spider. And if the owl brings the inversion of divine order and the bat brings spiritual blindness, the spider brings something devastating. It brings discord. It brings division. It tangles family relationships until peace becomes impossible. Because the spider does not act with violence. It acts by weaving. And that is precisely its deepest spiritual danger. Saint Teresa observes something that very few people understand. The spider does not hunt the way other animals do. It does not chase its prey. It does not attack head-on. The spider builds a trap. It weaves an invisible web, and it waits. It waits patiently for something to become caught. And when that happens, the victim does not even realize it immediately. It moves, it struggles, but every movement draws it deeper into the snare, until at last it is paralyzed, immobilized, and consumed. That same spiritual dynamic, according to Saint Teresa, unfolds in homes where spiders are allowed to go unchecked. An invisible web of conflict begins to form, small tensions that seem insignificant. A careless word here, a misunderstanding there, an uncomfortable silence, a contemptuous glance. And each of these threads adds to the last, weaving a web of resentment, distrust, and bitterness that eventually traps the whole family. In the biblical tradition, spider webs are used as a symbol of that which is fragile, deceptive, and seemingly solid, but not. The prophet Isaiah speaks of those who weave the spider's web to describe people who devise wicked schemes that appear firm, but that God dismantles with ease. Job says that the house of the ungodly is like a spider's web, unable to withstand divine judgment. Throughout Scripture, the spider consistently represents something false, something built on the wrong foundations. And Saint Teresa understood that when a spider enters a home and spins its web, it is not simply doing what its nature demands. It is acting as a living symbol of a spiritual reality unfolding within that house. It is showing that something is being woven in the shadows, that unspoken words are piling up, that grudges are being fed, that divisions are taking shape. Families where spiders are plentiful, where cobwebs form in the corners, and no one cleans them with any urgency, begin to show very recognizable patterns. Husbands and wives speak less. Conversations become shallow or tense. Children disappear into their rooms. Meals are eaten in silence or broken up by arguments. And no one can quite put their finger on when it all began. Because it was gradual, thread by thread, just as a spider builds its web. Saint Teresa gave particular warning about large, dark spiders, the kind that appear at night, that hide behind furniture, that startle you when you find them. Because those spiders, according to her mystical teaching, represent the deepest conflicts, the ones that are hidden, the ones a family refuses to face, the ones that stay in the dark because bringing them into the light would be far too painful. And there is something else about the spider that Saint Teresa considered especially dangerous. The spider is patient. It can remain perfectly still for hours, even days, simply waiting, without moving, without making a sound. And that very patience is the same patience that resentment holds in the human heart. Old hurts can lie dormant for years, but they are there, woven in silence, waiting for the right moment to surface. How many Christian families have experienced this? An argument that explodes over something trivial. Yet it is really the manifestation of years of unresolved wounds. A child who suddenly announces they want nothing more to do with their parents, leaving everyone stunned, when in truth that estrangement was woven over years of broken communication. A marriage that ends in divorce while everyone says, "But they seemed so happy." Never knowing that the web of indifference and lovelessness had been quietly spinning for a very long time. Saint Teresa taught her sisters that where there are spiders, there is a lack of spiritual vigilance, because a spider can only weave when no one is watching. It can only build its web in the forgotten corners, the spaces no one tends to, the places no one pays attention to. And the same is true in families. Discord can only weave itself where there is spiritual negligence, where family prayer has stopped, where God is no longer spoken of, where each person lives out their faith in isolation from the others, where no father or mother is keeping watch over the invisible threads beginning to divide the family. That is why Saint Teresa was uncompromising about keeping cobwebs cleared from the convents, not merely for hygiene, but for spiritual symbolism. Every cobweb removed was a reminder that nothing should be allowed to weave itself in the shadows, that everything must be brought into the light, that conflicts must be resolved promptly, that words must be spoken, that forgiveness must be given, that communication must remain open and honest. And if a Christian woman finds spiders frequently in her home, if cobwebs keep reappearing no matter how often she clears them, she must ask herself what is happening in the spiritual fabric of her household. She must examine whether there are conversations left unfinished, whether there are forgivenesses yet to be given, whether silences are quietly building walls. Because the physical presence of the spider is only the visible sign of an invisible reality already at work in the spiritual realm. But if the spider unsettles you, prepare yourself for the fourth animal, because the fourth is the one Saint Teresa called the door of the enemy. It is the most dangerous of all. It brings not only darkness, blindness, or discord. It literally opens the way for demonic forces to enter. And many Christian women have it in their homes right now, completely unaware of the mortal danger they are facing. The fourth animal that Saint Teresa identified in her mystical revelation is the most dangerous of all, the one that causes the greatest fear, the one that represents the most immediate and deadly peril in both the physical and spiritual realms. We are speaking of the scorpion. And when Saint Teresa spoke of this creature, she did so with a gravity she rarely showed in her writings, because the scorpion is not merely a forbidden animal. It is the very doorway through which the enemy enters the home. If the owl brings inversion of divine order, the bat brings spiritual blindness, and the spider brings discord, the scorpion brings something far worse. It brings betrayal, it brings poison, it brings spiritual death. And it does so in the quietest, most sudden way imaginable. Because the scorpion does not announce its attack. It makes no sound. It hides in the darkness. And when it strikes, it does so with devastating speed and precision. In Holy Scripture, the scorpion always appears as a symbol of pure evil. In the book of Revelation, when the fifth seal is opened, locusts with scorpion tails appear to torment those who do not bear the seal of God on their foreheads. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says to his disciples, "I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy." Christ himself equates the scorpion with the power of the devil. There is no ambiguity here. In the biblical tradition, the scorpion is a direct representative of the dark forces. Saint Teresa grasped this with absolute mystical clarity. She wrote that the scorpion is the inverted guardian. While angels stand watch over the gateways of good, the scorpion guards the gateways of evil. And when this animal enters a Christian home, it does not come alone. It comes opening the way for other malevolent forces to enter as well. It comes as the gatekeeper of darkness, flinging wide the spiritual doors that ought to remain sealed. And what is most frightening about the scorpion is its treacherous nature. It does not attack from the front like a lion. It does not pursue like a wolf. The scorpion waits. It hides in the most unexpected places, beneath stones, inside shoes, among folded clothing, in the dark corners where no one looks. And when someone unknowingly touches it or comes too close, the scorpion strikes without warning. It drives in its stinger. It injects its venom. And depending on the species and the victim, that venom can cause unbearable pain, paralysis, and even death. This same dynamic, according to Saint Teresa, operates in the spiritual realm. Families where scorpions have found their way in begin to experience betrayals, unexpected betrayals, betrayals that come from the last direction anyone would expect. A child who suddenly steals money from his parents, a husband who is unfaithful after years of what seemed to be a stable marriage, a close friend who becomes an enemy, a relative who speaks ill behind the family's back. All of these betrayals carry the hallmark of the scorpion. They come out of the darkness. They come without warning, and the venom they inject into the heart of the victim is absolutely devastating. But there is something more about the scorpion that Saint Teresa considered especially dangerous: the venom itself. Because the scorpion does not merely attack, it poisons. And the physical venom of the scorpion causes extreme pain, swelling, muscle paralysis, difficulty breathing. In the spiritual realm, the scorpion's venom causes something strikingly similar. It causes an emotional and spiritual pain that paralyzes a person. It causes an inflammation of pride and resentment. It causes a difficulty breathing spiritually. That is, an inability to pray, to find peace, to feel the presence of God. People who have been spiritually stung by the scorpion's presence in their homes describe very specific symptoms: a deep ache in the soul that they cannot explain, a constant sense of something pressing on the chest, a feeling that their prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, that God is very far away, and that no matter how much they cry or plead, there is no answer. This is the spiritual paralysis that the scorpion's venom produces, and Saint Teresa gave a further warning. She said that the scorpion, unlike the other three animals, has the ability to reproduce rapidly. A female scorpion can carry dozens of young, and those young, from the very moment they are born, already carry venom. They are already dangerous, and they all remain close to their mother during the early weeks, creating entire colonies in the dark recesses of the house. This capacity for multiplication is exactly what happens with grave sin in a home. Serious sin never comes alone. It brings other sins in its wake. One lie leads to another lie. One betrayal opens the door to further betrayals. An act of infidelity destroys trust and makes room for revenge, hatred, and bitterness, and it all multiplies. All of it expands until the entire house is infested with spiritual poison. Saint Teresa instructed her Carmelite sisters that if they ever found a scorpion in the convent, they were to kill it immediately. Not try to remove it alive, not show it mercy, because showing mercy to the scorpion is cruelty to the people who live in that place. And after killing it, they were to burn the body, sprinkle holy water over the spot where it was found, and pray a prayer of deliverance for 3 consecutive days. Because where a scorpion has been, a door has been left open that must be closed with spiritual authority. Many Christian women have had scorpions in their homes and know it. They have seen them. They have killed them. But they have not grasped the spiritual gravity of their presence. They have not carried out the necessary spiritual cleansing. They have not closed the doors these animals opened. And so, even though the scorpions are killed physically, the spiritual consequences continue. The betrayals continue. The venom keeps flowing. The pain remains. And if scorpions have appeared in your home, if you have found them inside your house, you must understand that it is not a coincidence. It is a sign. a sign that something in your home opened a dangerous spiritual door. And that door must be closed. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because every day that door remains open, the danger grows. And what began as a small crack can become a gaping entrance for darkness. Now you know the 4 animals that Saint Teresa identified in her revelation: the owl, the bat, the spider, and the scorpion. 4 forbidden animals, 4 spiritual gateways, 4 deadly dangers for any Christian home. But there is still one question left to answer, the most important one. Why these 4? Why did Saint Teresa receive this particular revelation? And the answer to that question will forever change the way you see your own home. The question many women find themselves asking is entirely legitimate. Why precisely these 4 animals? Why the owl, the bat, the spider, and the scorpion, and not others? There are hundreds of creatures in God's creation, many of them mentioned in the Bible with negative connotations: serpents, wolves, ravens, hyenas, jackals. So what is it about this specific combination of 4 that led Saint Teresa to receive them as divine revelation? The answer lies in the spiritual context in which Saint Teresa received this teaching. It was the year 1572, and she was in the midst of one of the most intense spiritual battles of her life. She was founding Reformed Carmelite convents across Spain, facing opposition both inside and outside the church. She was enduring direct spiritual attacks. She was experiencing temptations, darkness of soul, and what she herself described as assaults of the enemy against her mission. It was in the midst of this battle that the Lord showed her something crucial. He showed her that the Christian home is the primary battlefield, not convents, not churches, not monasteries. The home, the family. Because if the enemy can destroy the family, he destroys the very foundation of Christian society. If he can contaminate the home, he contaminates the wellspring from which future saints, future priests, and future mothers of faith are born. And it was then that God revealed to her that there are 4 specific doors through which the enemy enters homes. 4 points of vulnerability that every Christian family carries. And each of these 4 animals represents one of those doors. They are not arbitrary symbols. They are precise spiritual keys corresponding to specific spiritual realities. The owl represents the door of spiritual inversion. It is the door that swings open when a family begins to live backwards from God's order, when the night becomes more important than the day, when worldly entertainment replaces prayer, when the television is on more hours than the Bible is open, when children sleep in on Sunday mornings and skip Mass, when the work schedule is treated as more sacred than family time. All of this is inversion, and the owl is the guardian of that door. The bat represents the door of willful blindness. It is the door that opens when a family decides not to see what is really happening, when parents ignore the signs that their children are going down dark paths, when a wife turns a blind eye to obvious infidelity, when everyone pretends everything is fine while the house crumbles spiritually, when the comfort of ignorance is preferred over the pain of facing the truth. This willful blindness is the bat's specialty. The spider represents the door of destructive silence. It is the door that opens when the important things stop being said, when communication breaks down, when each member of the family lives in their own world, spinning their own separate life apart from the others, when meals are eaten in silence, when there are no longer any deep conversations, when the words, "I love you," "forgive me," "I need you," disappear from the family's vocabulary. And in that silence, the spider weaves its web of separation. The scorpion represents the door of betrayal of the sacred covenant. It is the door that opens when fundamental vows are broken, when marriage is betrayed, when the promise to raise children in the faith is abandoned, when the commitment to be a Christian family is shattered. The scorpion is the guardian of this door because its very nature is precisely that: to strike from behind, to poison what should be protected, to destroy from within. Saint Teresa understood that these 4 animals were not chosen at random. They were revealed because they correspond exactly to the 4 most common ways the enemy destroys Christian families. And most importantly, these 4 animals can physically enter any home. They are not mythical creatures. They are not beasts from a fable. They are real common animals that any woman might find in her house. And that is precisely the genius of this revelation. God uses the visible to teach the invisible. He uses the physical to reveal the spiritual. That is why Jesus spoke in parables drawn from everyday life: seeds, fish, coins, sheep, things people could see and touch. And Saint Teresa received that same divine pedagogy. God showed her 4 common animals so that every Christian woman could understand, without the need for complex theology, what the spiritual dangers of her home actually look like. Beyond that, these 4 animals share spiritual characteristics that make them perfect representatives of the dark forces. They are all nocturnal or prefer darkness. They all trigger instinctive fear in people. They all have the ability to enter a home without being invited. They can all cause real physical harm. And throughout history and across many cultures, they have all been regarded as harbingers of misfortune. But there is something deeper still. Saint Teresa noticed that these 4 animals form a progression, an escalation of spiritual danger. The owl announces, the bat invades, the spider ensnares, the scorpion kills. It is a sequence, a process. First comes the inversion of order, then blindness, then entanglement, and finally, total destruction. And if a family does not stop this process in its early stages, it will inevitably reach the last. This is why Saint Teresa insisted so strongly on vigilance, on not permitting even the first one. Because where the owl is tolerated, the bat will find its way in. Where the bat takes hold, the spider will find corners in which to spin. And where the spider has woven its web of division, the scorpion will find the path cleared to deliver the killing blow. This revelation was not given to create paralyzing fear. It was given to create active vigilance, so that every Christian woman would understand that her home is not a neutral space. It is a spiritual battlefield. And as in any battle, you must know your enemy. You must identify its tactics. You must close the gaps in your defenses. And you must act swiftly when an invasion is detected. The 4 animals are not the problem in and of themselves. They are the signs. They are the visible indicators of invisible realities. They are the unwelcome messengers who come to warn that something in the home has slipped out from under divine protection. And that is precisely their function in God's plan. Because God, in His mercy, does not allow the enemy to destroy without first sending warnings. And these warnings are clear, visible, impossible to ignore for anyone who has spiritual eyes to see. Now that you understand why these 4 animals were specifically revealed, you need to know something even more practical. You need to know how to recognize whether any of them has already entered your home, because it is not enough to spot them physically. There are spiritual signs that precede them. There are warnings that arise before the animal even appears. And knowing these signs can save you from a spiritual disaster. Saint Teresa did not only identify the 4 forbidden animals, she also revealed something equally important: the specific ways in which these animals manage to enter a Christian home. And what is most unsettling is that in most cases, the entry is not accidental. It is invited, not in words, but in actions, in negligences and spiritual oversights that throw the doors wide open. There are 7 principal entry points, 7 breaches in the spiritual protection of the home that every Christian woman must know and seal. Because it is not enough to kill the animal once it is already inside. you must close the doors through which it entered. Otherwise, it will return, or something worse will come. The first entry point is the lack of consecration of the home. Many Christian families have never consecrated their house to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. They have never blessed the rooms. They have never placed holy water at the entrances. They live in a house that is physically built but spiritually unprotected. It is like living in a fortress without any doors. The walls are there, but anything can enter freely. Saint Teresa taught that an unconsecrated home is a vulnerable home, and the four animals can sense that vulnerability from a distance. The second entry point is the presence of unblessed or spiritually contaminated objects. How many women bring second-hand items into their homes without any knowledge of the spiritual history those objects carry? Furniture from people who died in grave sin. Clothing from someone who practiced witchcraft. Decorations bought at flea markets that sat in homes filled with violence. These objects carry a negative spiritual charge, and when they enter the house, they open doors. Saint Teresa gave specific warning about this. She said that every object brought into the home should be blessed before use, especially anything of unknown origin. The third entry point is cursing words spoken within the home. And here many women are surprised because they do not realize the gravity of what they say. Phrases like, "This house is a living hell," "This family is cursed," "We're never going to get ahead," "I wish I'd never had children," "This marriage was a mistake." These words aren't merely expressions of frustration. They are spiritual decrees. They are negative invocations. And each time they are spoken, they crack open a fissure in the home's protection. Saint Teresa was unequivocal on this point. She taught that the tongue holds the power of life and death, and that in a Christian home, only words of blessing should be spoken. The fourth entry point is grave sin that has not been confessed. When a family member lives in mortal sin and does not seek the sacrament of reconciliation, that sin acts as a spiritual magnet. It attracts darkness. It attracts negative presences. And the four animals, which are sensitive to spiritual vibrations, are drawn toward that home. A hidden adultery, a secret addiction, a theft that has never been confessed, a hatred that has been nursed for years. All of these grave sins open enormous spiritual doors, and through those doors, it is not only animals that enter, it is demons. The fifth entry point is the neglect of family prayer. Saint Teresa taught that praying together as a family is the most powerful shield that exists against the dark forces. When a family prays together, it creates a field of spiritual protection around the home. But when family prayer disappears, that shield dissolves, and the home is left exposed. The four animals can detect a home without prayer from far away. It is like a house with no lights burning in the middle of the night. It becomes the easiest target. The sixth entry point is visits from people carrying negative intentions or heavy spiritual burdens. And this requires discernment, because not every visitor is a blessing. There are people who come to your home carrying envy, resentment, gossip, and negativity. There are people who practice occultism, witchcraft, or spiritualism. There are people who live in grave sin and have no awareness of it. When these people enter your home, they leave spiritual traces behind. They contaminate the atmosphere, and they open doors. Saint Teresa counseled her sisters to be extremely careful about who they allowed into sacred spaces, and the Christian home is a sacred space. The seventh entry point, perhaps the most subtle of all, is spiritually toxic entertainment. The films, television series, music, and content consumed inside the home have a direct spiritual impact. When a family habitually watches violent, sexual, occultic, or blasphemous material, they are literally inviting darkness into their living room. They are opening spiritual windows through which anything can slip in. Saint Teresa lived in a time before television and the internet, but she understood the principle. She taught that what enters through the eyes and ears feeds the soul. And if you feed your soul with filth, you will attract spiritual flies. And where there are flies, the creatures that feed on them will follow. These 7 entry points do not always operate in isolation. They frequently combine. A family that no longer prays together, consumes toxic entertainment, has unblessed objects throughout the house, and speaks cursing words in moments of anger, that family is creating a perfect storm. It is not opening one door, but 7 simultaneously. And when that happens, the 4 animals do not just enter. They settle in, they multiply, and they begin to govern that home spiritually. But here is the important part. Saint Teresa did not reveal these entry points to create despair. She revealed them to create awareness and action. Because every single one of these 7 entry points can be reversed. Every door that has been opened can be closed. Every breach can be sealed. But it requires a decision. It requires immediate action. It requires taking seriously the spiritual war being waged for the soul of your family. And there are concrete signs that indicate one or more of these doors is already open in your home. Frequent nightmares with no medical cause. Constant arguments over trivial things. A feeling of heaviness when you enter certain rooms. Objects falling or breaking for no reason. Recurring health problems that doctors cannot explain. Depression affecting multiple family members at the same time. Financial difficulties that do not correspond to your actual income. A slow but steady withdrawal from faith and religious practice. All of these signs are warnings. They are spiritual alarm bells. They are the smoke that comes before the fire. And if you ignore them, if you normalize them, if you put them down to bad luck or that's just life, you are losing precious time. Because while you are dismissing the signs, the animals are already inside. They are already at work. They are already causing destruction. Saint Teresa was direct. She said that God always gives warning before allowing a catastrophe. He always sends signs. He always offers opportunities for course correction. But if those signs are ignored, a point is reached where divine protection begins to withdraw. Not because God abandons us, but because the human free will has chosen negligence over vigilance. And then comes what no Christian family ever wants to experience. What Saint Teresa documented in real cases of families she knew personally. Families torn apart by unexpected betrayals. Children who ended up on dark paths. Marriages that exploded after years of apparent stability. Illnesses that consumed the entire family. Financial ruin with no logical explanation. And in every single one of these cases, when the spiritual history of those homes was examined, the same 7 open doors were found, and the presence of the 4 animals. But there is hope. There is always hope. Because what Saint Teresa saw in destroyed families, she also saw in restored ones. And those stories of restoration are what you need to hear now. What you are about to hear is not legend. These are not invented stories designed to frighten. These are documented testimonies found in the parish archives of Carmelite convents, gathered by religious sisters who followed Saint Teresa's teachings. Testimonies from real families who experienced the devastating consequences of allowing these 4 animals into their homes, but also testimonies of redemption, restoration, and spiritual victory from families who finally closed those doors. The first case was documented in the year 1603, barely 20 years after Saint Teresa's death. A merchant family in the city of Avila began to experience a series of inexplicable misfortunes. The father, a devout man who attended daily mass, began having terrible nightmares. He dreamed that something was hunting him in the dark. He would wake gasping, unable to breathe. His wife noticed him growing increasingly irritable, increasingly distant, increasingly cold toward her and their children. When the religious sisters of the Carmelite convent heard of the family's situation, They sent an elderly sister who had been a direct disciple of Saint Teresa. This woman visited the home, and the first thing she noticed was an owl nesting in the roof. It had been there for months. The family heard it calling every night, but had never given it any thought. They considered it a normal part of the environment. The sister explained Saint Teresa's teaching and asked them to remove the nest immediately. But it was not enough. During her inspection of the house, she also found bats in the attic, massive cobwebs in corners that had not been cleaned in years, and, to everyone's horror, a living scorpion beneath the matrimonial bed. All 4 animals were present, and their effects were evident in every member of that family. The sister guided them through a complete process of purification. They blessed every room. They burned the owl's nest and cleared the attic. They cleaned away every cobweb while praying the full rosary. They killed the scorpion and burned its body, burying the ashes far from the property. They consecrated the home to the Sacred Heart, and for 3 consecutive days, the entire family prayed together, asking for divine protection. The changes were immediate and documented. The father's nightmares stopped that very same week. The tension in the marriage diminished dramatically. The children, who had been falling ill frequently, recovered their health. And most strikingly, the family business, which had been on the brink of ruin, began to prosper in a way that no one could rationally explain. This testimony was recorded in the convent archives with an exact date and full names. The second case occurred in 1847 on an estate near Salamanca. An aristocratic family began to unravel from within. The 2 eldest sons, raised in the Catholic faith, began to fight constantly. The arguments escalated to physical violence. The mother fell into a deep sadness that no doctor could cure, and the father began making irrational financial decisions that threatened the entire family fortune. A Carmelite sister, who regularly visited the estate to give catechism to the children, noticed something deeply troubling. There were spiders everywhere. Not small, ordinary spiders. Large, dark spiders spinning enormous webs in the corners, in the hallways, in the bedrooms. And no one in the family cleared them. They said they had always been there and did no harm. The sister recalled Saint Teresa's teaching about the spider as a symbol of discord. She looked deeper and discovered that the family had not prayed together in more than 2 years. Each person lived their own life under the same roof. There was no real communication, only cold coexistence. The spider had woven its web of silent, perfect division. The intervention was drastic. The sister persuaded the family to undergo a full spiritual cleansing. They removed every cobweb while speaking aloud the resentments they had been carrying. They asked forgiveness of one another. They reinstated daily family prayer. And something extraordinary happened. As the physical cobwebs disappeared, the emotional ones began to dissolve as well. The brothers reconciled. The mother's joy returned. The father recovered his clarity of mind, and the family was restored. This case too was documented in meticulous detail in the convent chronicles. The third case is more recent and was gathered by Carmelite sisters in Mexico during the 20th century. A devout farming family began experiencing consecutive tragedies. First, the youngest son died from a scorpion sting. 6 months later, the eldest daughter suffered a devastating romantic betrayal that left her on the brink of suicide. A year after that, the father was betrayed at work and left without employment or resources. A visiting sister noticed that while scorpions were common in that region, they seemed to appear in that particular house more than anywhere else. They were being found inside constantly, and each time one was killed, more appeared. It was as though the house was drawing them in like a magnet. The sister investigated the family's spiritual history and uncovered something deeply troubling. Years earlier, the grandmother had been the victim of a severe family betrayal over an inheritance. In her pain and fury, She had pronounced curses against her own siblings. Those words were never taken back. That bitterness was never healed. And the curse, though not directed at her own family, had contaminated the spiritual lineage. The sister instructed the family to take a radical step. They were to seek out the relatives with whom the rupture had occurred, however painful that might be. They were to ask forgiveness for the curses that had been spoken. They were to bless where they had cursed. And they were to reconsecrate the home with renewed spiritual authority. The process took months, but it worked. The scorpions stopped appearing in the house. The tragedies ceased. And gradually, peace returned. This testimony was recorded in 1973 and continues to be studied in Carmelite circles of spirituality. These three testimonies share one thing in common. In every case, the presence of the animals was not coincidence. It was the sign of open spiritual doors, and in every case, the solution was not merely to kill the animals physically. It was to close the spiritual doors that had invited them in, to restore divine order to the home, to consecrate the house to God once more. But these testimonies are only the tip of the iceberg. There are dozens, perhaps hundreds of similar cases documented in ecclesiastical archives. Families who ignored the warnings and paid devastating consequences, but also families who responded in time and were spared from far greater disasters. And all of these stories confirm the same truth. Saint Teresa's 4 animals are not superstition. They are a spiritual reality that manifests itself in the physical world. And if you are experiencing any of the consequences described in these testimonies, if you recognize the patterns, if you have seen these animals in your home, you must understand that it is not too late, that there is hope, that there is a way through. But first, you need to know what common errors are allowing these animals to stay. Errors you may be making right now without even realizing it. Now we come to the most practical, and perhaps the most uncomfortable, part of this teaching. Because what you are about to discover are the specific mistakes that many Christian women, devout and well-intentioned, make every single day without knowing they are opening the doors to these 4 animals. These are not necessarily grave sins. They are negligences, oversights, practices that seem harmless but carry devastating consequences in the spiritual realm. The first everyday error is leaving windows and doors open at night without spiritual protection. Many women will say it is necessary to air out the house. It is warm, they need fresh air. And all of that is perfectly valid from a physical standpoint. But from a spiritual standpoint, Saint Teresa taught something crucial. The night is the enemy's territory. It is when the dark forces have the greatest freedom of movement. And a window left open during the night without holy water on the frame is an open invitation for anything at all to enter. All 4 animals are nocturnal. The owl hunts by night. The bat only ventures out at dusk. The spider spins her web while everyone sleeps. The scorpion moves in darkness, and all of them can detect an unprotected window from a distance. Saint Teresa instructed her sisters that if it was truly necessary to open windows at night, they were to sprinkle holy water on the frame and speak a prayer of protection. This simple but powerful practice creates a spiritual seal that these animals cannot cross. The second everyday error is allowing broken or damaged objects to remain in the home without being repaired. Cracked mirrors, broken furniture, doors that do not close properly, windows with broken panes, walls with cracks. All of this, beyond the physical appearance, represents fractures in the spiritual integrity of the home. Because just as these objects are broken in the physical realm, they create ruptures in the spiritual realm. Saint Teresa taught that a Christian home should reflect order and care, not out of vanity, but because physical order upholds spiritual order. When a house is full of broken things, it sends a spiritual message. It communicates negligence, abandonment, that no one is truly tending to that space. and the four animals are expert at detecting negligence. It is their signal to enter. The third everyday error is accumulating unnecessary objects, especially in dark corners and forgotten spaces. How many women have basements, storerooms, closets, or entire rooms stuffed with things they never use, never need, just sitting there gathering dust? And those very forgotten spaces are precisely where the four animals find the perfect shelter. The spider spins between old boxes. The scorpion hides among piled fabrics. The bat finds gaps in dark, cluttered spaces. And the owl, though it does not physically enter these spaces, is drawn by the energy of abandonment that radiates from them. Saint Teresa was clear. A Christian home must practice material detachment. Do not hoard, do not cling. And above all, do not allow entire sections of the house to become spiritual dumping grounds where anything can take root undetected. The fourth everyday error, and this one is especially serious, is neglecting spiritual cleansing while becoming obsessed with physical cleanliness. There are women who clean their homes every single day. They mop, dust, tidy, and disinfect. The house gleams physically, but spiritually it is in ruins. No holy water, no crucifixes in the bedrooms, no sacred images, no prayer in the home. The food is never blessed, no rosaries hanging anywhere, no Bible open. These homes may be spotlessly clean on the outside, but spiritually they are empty. And a spiritually empty space is a vulnerable space. It is like a fortress with high walls, but no soldiers inside. The four animals can enter without any resistance. Saint Teresa taught that physical cleaning and spiritual cleaning must go hand in hand. That while you sweep away the dust, you should pray. That while you bring order to the house, you should bless each space. That the cleaning of a home should be an act of worship, not merely an act of hygiene. The fifth everyday error is ignoring the dreams and signs that God sends as warnings. How many women have had recurring dreams about animals? Dreams in which they see owls, bats, spiders, or scorpions. Disturbing dreams that wake them in the middle of the night with their hearts pounding. And instead of paying attention, instead of praying and asking for discernment, they simply push it aside. They put it down to stress, to something they ate, to their imagination. But Saint Teresa taught that God speaks through dreams. Not every dream is a divine message, but some are. And when a Christian woman repeatedly dreams of these four specific animals, it is not coincidence. It is a warning. It is God telling her that something in her home needs immediate spiritual attention, that a door is open, that danger is near. And alongside the dreams are physical signs that are also dismissed. The persistent call of an owl near the house, the repeated sighting of bats at dusk, cobwebs constantly reappearing in the same spots, scorpions encountered with unusual frequency. All of these are signs. They are spiritual alarm bells, and when they are ignored, the consequences become inevitable. Saint Teresa documented cases of women who received clear warnings in their dreams and ignored them, and weeks or months later, they experienced family tragedies that could have been avoided had they only paid attention. This is not about living in paranoia. It is about living in spiritual vigilance, about staying alert, about refusing to normalize what is not normal. These 5 errors may seem small. They may seem inconsequential. But when they accumulate, when they are practiced day after day, year after year, they create the perfect conditions for the 4 animals not merely to enter, but to settle in permanently. And once established, dislodging them requires serious spiritual intervention. But here is the good news. Every one of these 5 errors can be corrected. Today, right now. It requires no money. It requires no permission from anyone. It only requires a decision and deliberate action. It requires that you take seriously the spiritual battle being fought for your home. that you stop minimizing the signs, that you stop putting off the spiritual cleansing. And if you correct these 5 errors, if you seal these 5 breaches, you will have already taken a giant step forward in the protection of your family. But avoiding errors alone is not enough. You also need to take positive action. You need to do something proactive to close the doors and expel whatever has already entered. And that is precisely what Saint Teresa taught, a specific ritual of purification for the home that has worked for centuries. Saint Teresa did not only warn of the dangers, she also provided the solution, a specific ritual of purification that she taught to her Carmelite sisters and that has been handed down through the centuries. A ritual that any Christian woman can perform in her own home without the need for a priest, though priestly blessing is always recommended whenever possible. This ritual must be carried out with absolute faith, a repentant heart, and a firm determination to close every spiritual door that was open through negligence or sin. This is not magic. It is not superstition. It is an act of spiritual authority that every Christian woman possesses by virtue of her baptism. The ritual begins with confession. Before attempting to cleanse the house spiritually, you must first cleanse your own soul. If you have committed grave sins, seek the sacrament of reconciliation. If you cannot go to confession immediately, make a deep and sincere act of contrition, with the commitment to go to confession as soon as possible, because you cannot drive darkness from your home if darkness dwells in your own heart. Once your soul is clean, proceed with the simultaneous physical and spiritual purification of the home. Begin by removing everything that is physically dirty or disordered. Clear every cobweb, sweep every corner, remove broken or unnecessary objects. This physical cleansing matters because it represents the disposition of your heart to release everything that contaminates. As you clean, pray without ceasing. You may pray the full rosary or repeat short prayers such as, "Lord Jesus, purify this home," or "Let your light drive out every darkness." Prayer should be continuous throughout the entire process of cleaning. After the physical cleansing is done, prepare holy water. If you do not have any, you can request it from your parish. With the holy water, walk through the entire house, room by room. At every entrance, door, and window, make the sign of the cross with the holy water and say, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I seal this entry against all evil." Give special attention to the corners, where darkness tends to gather spiritually. In each room, especially the bedrooms, place or renew the sacramentals: a crucifix in a visible spot, an image of the Sacred Heart, Benedictine medals, holy cards of patron saints. These sacred objects serve as permanent spiritual guardians. Saint Teresa especially recommended consecrating the home to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. This consecration should be spoken aloud, with the whole family present if possible. You may use a formal prayer of consecration, or simply declare with faith, "I consecrate this home to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. May He reign here as Lord and Protector." Finally, and this is crucial, establish daily family prayer as a permanent practice. Even if it is brief, even if it is only 5 minutes, the family must pray together each day. This ongoing prayer keeps the spiritual shield active. It is the seal that prevents the 4 animals from ever finding their way back in. This ritual should be repeated at least once a year, ideally on a meaningful occasion, such as the beginning of Lent or the Feast of the Sacred Heart. And it should be repeated immediately if you detect the presence of any of the 4 animals again, or if you experience the signs of open doors once more. After performing the purification ritual, many women wonder whether it truly worked, whether the spiritual doors have actually been closed, whether the 4 animals have truly been expelled. And Saint Teresa, knowing this natural concern, taught something wonderful. God always confirms when a home has been restored under His protection. He always gives clear, unmistakable signs. The first sign is an inexplicable peace, not a superficial calm, but a deep peace that permeates the entire house. You feel it the moment you walk through the door. The atmosphere feels different, lighter, brighter. Even visitors notice it without being able to say quite what has changed. It is the presence of the Holy Spirit filling the space that darkness once occupied. The second sign is the restoration of sleep. Nightmares cease. The anguished waking in the early hours of the morning stops. Children sleep peacefully through the night. And when you do dream, your dreams are peaceful, or even full of beautiful symbolism. Angels, light, gardens, crystal clear water. Saint Teresa taught that when a home is under a divine protection, even dreams reflect that covering. The third sign is the restoration of family communication. Conversations begin to flow again. Arguments diminish dramatically. There is laughter in the house. There are spontaneous moments of affection. Family meals stop being tense and become genuine moments of connection. The web of division that the spider had woven unravels completely. The fourth sign is the return of the desire to pray. When a home is protected, prayer stops feeling like an obligation and becomes a natural longing. Family members begin to seek out moments of time with God. The Bible is opened more often. The rosary is prayed without inner resistance. Sunday Mass becomes a priority again, not a burden. The fifth sign is restored health. Mysterious illnesses disappear. Chronic pains without medical explanation cease. Vitality returns to every member of the family. And while ordinary health problems may still arise, there is no longer that sense of constant oppressive sickness that once characterized the home. The sixth sign, and perhaps the most tangible of all, is the physical absence of the four animals. Owls stop calling nearby. Bats no longer enter the house. Spiders diminish dramatically or vanish altogether. And scorpions, if they were once frequent, now become extremely rare or disappear entirely. It is as though these animals sense that they are no longer welcome and begin seeking other places. Saint Teresa taught that these 6 signs typically begin to manifest within days or weeks after the purification ritual. And when you experience them, you can be absolutely certain that your home is once again under the protection of the Most High, that the doors have been closed, that the enemy has been expelled, and that your family is safe. But this protection is neither automatic nor permanent without ongoing maintenance. It requires continuous vigilance, daily prayer, an active sacramental life, a commitment not to repeat the mistakes that opened the doors in the first place. Because a protected home is a watchful home. We have come to the end of the revelation that Saint Teresa of Avila received more than 4 centuries ago. A revelation as relevant and urgent today as it was then. Because the spiritual dangers that threaten our homes have not changed. The enemy's tactics remain the same, and the need for divine protection is more pressing than ever in these times when faith is under constant attack. Now you know the 4 animals that must never enter a Christian home. The owl, which brings the inversion of divine order. The bat, which brings spiritual blindness. The spider, which weaves discord and division. And the scorpion, which flings wide the doors to the darkest forces. They are not merely animals. They are living symbols of spiritual realities. They are signs of open doors that must be closed without delay. You also know the 7 invisible ways through which these animals gain entry. The absence of home consecration, unblessed objects, cursing words, grave unconfessed sin, the neglect of family prayer, visits from those carrying heavy spiritual burdens, and spiritually toxic entertainment. Each of these represents a breach in your spiritual defenses, a breach that must be sealed. You have heard the documented testimonies of families who suffered devastating consequences by ignoring these warnings. But you have also heard the stories of restoration. Families on the brink of collapse who were saved when they finally took the spiritual battle for their homes seriously. These are not exceptional cases. They can become your story too, the testimony you yourself will one day share. You now know the 5 everyday errors that even the most devout women commit. Errors that seem insignificant but that, accumulated over time, create the perfect conditions for spiritual invasion. And most importantly, you know how to correct them. It is not complicated. It requires no extraordinary resources, only awareness, vigilance, and decisive action. You have been given the ritual of purification that Saint Teresa taught. A simple but powerful ritual that any Christian woman can carry out in her own home. Physical cleansing accompanied by prayer, holy water on every entrance, sacramentals in every room, consecration of the home to the Sacred Heart, and the firm commitment to maintain daily family prayer as a permanent shield. And you know how to recognize the signs that your home has been restored under divine protection. The inexplicable peace, the return of restful sleep, renewed family communication, the desire to pray, recovered health, and the physical absence of the 4 animals. These signs are God's own confirmation that your house is once again His house. But all of this knowledge counts for nothing if it does not become action. You can hear this teaching, agree with every word, recognize that your home needs this purification. But if you do not act, nothing will change. The 4 animals will remain inside. The doors will stay open. And the consequences will continue to manifest in your family. Saint Teresa was a woman of action. She did not only contemplate God, she worked tirelessly to establish His kingdom on earth. She founded 17 convents in the face of fierce opposition. She reformed an entire religious order. She wrote books that are still transforming lives centuries later. And in the midst of all that intense activity, she never neglected the small things. She never ignored the details. She never minimized the everyday spiritual dangers. She understood something foundational, that the great spiritual battles are won or lost in the small decisions of daily life, in whether you pray or you do not, in whether you bless your home or leave it unprotected, in whether you pay attention to the signs or look the other way, in whether you take authority over your home or allow anything and everything to walk freely through the door. And she left a promise. A beautiful and powerful promise for every Christian woman who takes the spiritual protection of her family seriously. Saint Teresa promised that every home consecrated to the Sacred Heart, every home where daily prayer is maintained, every home where the spiritual gateways are kept watch over, is a home where Jesus Himself dwells as King and Protector. And where He dwells, the enemy cannot remain. This promise has been verified by millions of families over 4 centuries. Families that were destroyed and were rebuilt. Families that were under attack and found refuge. Families that were losing their faith and found it again. They all share one thing in common. They acted. They did not wait for things to improve on their own. They did not trust in luck. They trusted in God and acted accordingly. Your home can be a sanctuary, a place where your children grow up spiritually safe, a place where your marriage flourishes, a place where the presence of God is so real that everyone who walks through the door can feel it, a place where the 4 forbidden animals never find their way in again. But it all begins with a decision you must make today, not tomorrow, not next week. Today, begin this very evening with the purification ritual. Cleanse your home physically and spiritually. Seal the doors with holy water. Consecrate your home to the Sacred Heart. And establish family prayer as a permanent daily practice. These are simple steps, but their impact will be eternal. And remember the 3 words that Saint Teresa spoke every night before sleep to seal her home against every spiritual invasion. 3 words that have protected countless families for centuries. 3 words you must make your own from this day forward. Jesus protect here. As simple as that, as powerful as that. If this message has touched your heart, if you recognized that your home needs this protection, show it by subscribing to this channel, where we will continue sharing the profound teachings of the saints that the Church has preserved for moments exactly like this one. Give it a like if you feel that this revelation arrived at the precise moment your family needed it. And share this video with every Christian woman you know, because there are thousands of homes under spiritual attack whose families have no idea why everything is falling apart. I also invite you to watch our next video about Saint Teresa's most powerful prayers for family protection. Teachings that perfectly complement everything you have learned today. May the Lord bless your home. May the Sacred Heart of Jesus reign in your family. And may the 4 forbidden animals never again cross your threshold. Amen.